Good afternoon. My name is Chris Sleek. I'm Chair of the City County Planning Board. I'd like to call the meeting to order and welcome everyone to our August 11th meeting. Would you please stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Today's meeting is being broadcast live on TV 13 and will be rebroadcast at 10 a.m. Friday morning and again at 4 p.m. Sunday afternoon. Our first order of business today will be the consent agenda. These are items for which the petitioner is requesting withdrawal or continuance, or items for which staff has recommended approval and no one has signed up to speak in opposition. For all public hearings, each side will have a total of 12 minutes. There will be no rebuttal period. Once the public hearing is closed and the board goes into work session, no one is permitted to speak unless a planning board member asks them a question. For general use district zoning requests, the planning board must consider the full range of uses allowed in the zoning district being requested. The petitioner may not refer to a specific use for the property. For special use district zoning requests, however, the petitioner must identify the intended use or uses of the site and give specific details on how the site will be developed. Items under Section B of the agenda will require final action by the appropriate elected body, either the city council or county commissioners. As such, votes taken today by the planning board concerning these items are recommendations that will be considered by the elected bodies during their review of the requests. Before addressing the planning board, we will need your name, address, and zip code for the record. Our first item of business is the approval of the minutes of the July 14th and July 28th meetings. Are there any additions or corrections? Is there a motion?
Move approval.
Motion by Mr. Lamb,
Second.
second by Ms. McRae. All those, any further comments? All those in favor, sign of aye.
Aye.
That is unanimous. Thank you. I'm now going to call on Mr. David Reed to review the consent agenda.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, it's been a long time since I did the consent agenda. I don't know how Desmond did it, but I'll do it like I used to in the old days. Pull this up. And we will. First of all, we have several automatic continuances. We actually have items B2, B3, and B8 are all being continued to the September 8th meeting. And items B6 and D1 are being continued to the October 13th meeting. So the first consent item we have is item B4. This is zoning docket W3541, Ivy Brook Academy. It's a rezoning from GOS to GOS to add use child daycare center and child daycare drop-in. It's 1.17 acres, and it's located on the southern terminus of Plaza West Road, north of Vest Mill Road. So this is a site plan shown here. It's an existing office building, no longer in use. They're going to convert it for the daycare drop-in use. Originally, this site had a driveway across the north side and a cross driveway across the southern side. They're closing up the northern one for the outdoor play area, and they will still have a cross connection to the east in the lower right part of the site, and then they'll have access onto Plaza West Drive in the upper left-hand side of the site. So this meets the requirements of the ordinance, and staff recommends approval of the zoning and approval of the site plan.
No one has signed up. Is anyone here opposed to this recommendation? Seeing no one, I declare the public hearing closed. What is the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman,
Is that a question? Yes, sir.
I have a question for, do we know anything about Vest Mill Road and any improvements, anything with DOT?
Well, actually, when this originally came in, they were proposing a driveway onto Vest Mill Road, and we recommend that they not do that, and they took it off the plan. So this does not have any impact on Vest Mill Road because it doesn't have any access onto it.
At all? You can't get to it to get in? People won't use that to get into this eventually?
No.
That's right.
Great, okay.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the planning board find that the request is consistent with the comprehensive plan.
I have a motion by Mr. Lamb,
Second.
Second by Ms. Dunnigan. Any discussion? All those in favor, sign of aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same sign. That is unanimous.
Mr. Chairman, I further move that the planning board recommend approval of W 3541.
A motion by Mr. Lamb,
Second.
second by Ms. McRae. Any further discussion? All those in favor, sign of aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same sign. That is unanimous.
The next consent item is item B5, case W3542. It's DPJ 920 Brookstown. This is a site plan amendment to a PBS zone site on 4.16 acres at the southwest corner of West 2nd Street and Brookstown Avenue. Also has frontage on West 1st Street and Fayette Street. This is a change to add 1 story to the building. You saw this come through as a final development plan in PBS not too long ago. It's actually the same building layout with the addition of 1 story and the removal of one of the access points into the parking deck. Revised TIS was done, and that was reviewed by Winston-Salem DOT, and they're fine with the changes, the reduced access point, and we have recommendations for conditions to meet the TIS recommendations. So with that, staff would recommend approval of this change to this PBS site.
Mr. Bryan?
Mr. Reed, so what exactly is changing? Is it just going 1 story higher? And they're going 1 story higher with the parking deck as well?
Yes.
No other changes around the circumference of the building or perimeter?
No, other than the second access point is going away, but otherwise, the footprint of the building remains the same.
Yeah. Yeah, of course, I wish all these buildings would go up to 10 stories because it's very efficient and environmentally good, everything like that. So, yeah.
Yeah, great. Any other questions for staff? All right, no one has signed up. Is anyone here opposed to this recommendation? Seeing no one, I declare the public hearing closed. What is the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the planning board find that the request is consistent with the comprehensive plan.
Motion by Mr. Lamb,
Second.
second by Ms. McRae. Any discussion? All those in favor, sign of aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposes? That is unanimous.
And Mr. Chairman, I further move that the planning board recommend approval of W 3542.
A motion by Mr. Lamb,
Second.
second by Ms. McRae. Any discussion? All those in favor, sign of aye.
Aye.
Oppose the same sign. That is unanimous. Thank you.
Okay, the next consent item is item B7, docket F1619, Novakovich High Point Audiological. It's a rezoning from AG to NOS on a 1-acre site on the west side of NC 66 South, south of Bunker Hill Sandy Ridge Road. This is the site of a former church that is no longer in use, so it's been on the market, and this organization would like to reuse the property. It has the church building and associated outbuildings on the site. They will remain. The access point on the front is turning into a 1-way drop-off access, and they're developing the required parking on the north side of the building. This meets the requirements of the ordinance, and staff recommends approval of the rezoning and the site plan.
Are there any questions for staff? All right. No one has signed up. Is anyone here opposed to this recommendation? Seeing no one, I declare the public hearing closed. What is the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I move the planning board find that the request is consistent with the comprehensive plan.
Motion by Mr. Lamb,
Second.
second by Ms. McRae. Any discussion? All those in favor, sign of aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same sign. That's unanimous.
Mr. Chairman, I further move that the planning board recommend approval of F1619.
I have a motion by Mr. Lamb, second by Ms. McRae. Any discussion? All those in favor, sign of aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same sign. That is unanimous.
The last consent item is not a public hearing item, it's a subdivision. This is item C1, subdivision 2022-087, Terrace at Quail Haven. It's a 114-lot subdivision in RS9 zoning on 62.23 acres. It's located at the northern terminus of Quail Haven Lane, which is north of Kernersville Road. And you see on the location map here, that's part of Salem Lake, north of the site. Here's a copy of the proposed plan. It has one access point off Quail Haven. It also has 2 stub connections that could be future connections. And this meets the requirements of the ordinance, and staff would recommend approval with conditions.
Mr. Chairman, I move approval.
A motion by Mr. Lamb, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. McRae. Any discussion?
Yeah. What kind of care will the city put in there for the protection of Salem Lake? Will they put any extra things in? I know it's got enough buffer, I think, right? But there was a mention in the staff report.
Yeah, it is in the critical area of the Salem Lake watershed. And so I reached out to stormwater staff to see if they wanted their language amended. And they said that the language they use in their standard condition will cover the requirements of this area. It requires that they do a stormwater study and meet the requirements for the critical area. So they take care of it with their condition, and they will be reviewing their stormwater plan.
Do you have any idea what that is for my information? I mean, do they up the number of years of the stormwater, or do they have other overflow protections?
No, I can't speak to that.
Okay. Yeah, you know.
It's probably just that the pond's going to have to be a little larger than what's shown here. That, from my professional opinion, that's what they're going to have to do, if not any like underwater improvements. So I'm not a stormwater specialist, but that's probably, this drawing is going to shift slightly. That's my guess.
What I was going to say is it would more than likely entail additional stormwater quality measures. Being that close to the critical area, there are probably provisions in the city code and the UDO, that the environmental section of the UDO that stormwater and erosion control manage, that would probably have a higher level of filtering, but probably no more from a water quantity standpoint.
Yeah.
Did we carry?
We had a motion and a second.
Yeah. All those in favor, sign of aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That is unanimous.
All right, Mr. Allwood will present our first public hearing item.
Mr. Chairman, while Mark is coming up, I would just point out, generally speaking, items on B1 of the agenda do move on to the elected body. This particular case that we're hearing today is a final development plan that stops at the planning board. So I did just want to make sure that folks understand that the vote taken here today would be to approve the final development plan, which is the site plan of record. The zoning decision was made 18 years ago in 2003 when the property was rezoned.
Thank you.
All right, we're here today to look at W2744. The petitioner is UCIC Development Company, LLC. The site is 57.29 acres located on the northern terminus of Millennium Drive, and the request is a final development plan for uses of manufacturing A, manufacturing B, and warehousing, and LIS two-phase zoning district. This property is located on the southeast section of the city of Winston-Salem. It is in GMA3 suburban neighborhood. The final development plan is what you see in orange. The property that we're looking at in particular is this northern piece right here. There we go, northern piece you see up front. It's bounded to the north by residential, to the east by industrial, light industrial, to the south is a combination of general industrial and agriculture, and to the west is residential. Currently, the site is wooded with some utility easements cutting through. So this is looking west at the terminus of Millennium Drive. This is where proposed lot building 4 will be. Looking north at the terminus of Millennium Drive, proposed building lot 3 would be on the right, and proposed building lot 4 will be on the left. This is from the northern terminus looking south. Site is on the left, right, and behind me. This is on Temple School Road looking east. Millennium Drive is on the left. And this is Temple School Road looking southwest. Millennium Drive is to the right. The area plan has this as industrial. Okay, here's the site plan. What they have here is a 50-foot type 3 buffer yard to the north with a safe tree area that's combined with it, but a little bit larger. It's looks like diamond symbology. As you come down here, this is building number 3, proposed 3. This is a 500,000 square foot building with the northern portion being for truck loading and unloading and the western part being for parking. There are 2 access points on Millennium Drive here and here. And then building lot number 4 is 144,114 square feet. I think it's 32 feet high. It also has the same type buffer yard that you saw up here, 50-foot type 3 perimeter, but it has a 4-foot berm to help increase the screening for the properties here, the residential properties you got here to the southwest. Let's see. I think I basically, oh yeah, the stormwater pond. There is a stormwater pond to the north that's in between the loading area and the buffer yard. This request is consistent with the recommendations of the Southeast Forsyth County Area Plan Update and Legacy. The request would enable the development of an undeveloped site, the majority of which has been industrially zoned since 2003. This request will comply with Phase 1 zoning conditions, which includes building material standards and HVAC screening. So the building material standards is it can't be metal and it can't be concrete blocks. So, for this final development plan, staff recommends approval. The site plan meets UDO requirements.
Are there any questions for staff?
Mr.
sir.
Arvid, from the letters that have come in, help me with the topography here of where the neighborhood is in relationship of height to this larger building.
You see the neighborhoods here, the
Yeah.
buildings here. I'm going to have a hard time visually seeing this, but I'll let you speak.
I was going to say, I did look at this. The finished floor elevation of the proposed 500,000 square foot building is elevation 904. As you drive up Glenway Drive to the north, you don't hit an elevation of 900 until you get to until you get to the name of that road, which is actually not even on this
Yeah.
image.
Kind of up above.
So, essentially, it slopes down. If you're coming down the neighborhood street, you have the stream, and where the stormwater management pond is kind of in a bottom, that's probably at around elevation 845 to 855. And then you come back up, and then the building pad is sitting at about elevation, like I said, 904. So, if you're in the neighborhood, you're going to be looking up at the building. It's my understanding that based on some of the letters that we've heard and some of the internal emails that have been bouncing around back and forth between staff and the petitioner and their engineer and designers, they have a potential solution that might alleviate some of those concerns with visibility, but we'll allow them to discuss that. But that's kind of how the elevation works. It's kind of a valley, but they're up here on a plateau, and you've got some homes up here on a plateau, and then some of the homes go down, and this site slopes down. So
That's helpful. With the trees, I couldn't really judge where things were. Yeah.
Any additional questions for staff?
Yeah, the only one I would ask is just for clarification's sake, around the existing stormwater facility, was it a requirement that all the vegetation around it, as shown here, be removed back when it was built?
To be honest with you, I'm not sure the answer to that one.
Yeah.
Because essentially, and again, I'll let the engineer for the project speak to this, but, there was an overall LIS that was approved, and I'm not sure if this stormwater management pond is part of the Dale site whenever it was constructed. I believe it has its own. This stormwater management pond probably was associated with the Bunzel and the other projects that have been built on Millennium Drive, but it's my understanding that this stormwater management pond is already in place. And obviously, if you're citing a stormwater management pond, you have to
grade, create the area for the water to be stored, have the side slopes and things, to keep the water there. So, you would have to clear that area around where the stormwater management pond would be. Now, they've retained those trees closest to the neighborhood, but, again, as the neighborhood and as we've already talked about, those trees are going to kind of be below where those homes are, and the industrial building is up above that. So those existing trees in and of itself, while it meets the ordinance requirement, isn't going to do a lot from taking that sight, basically obstructing the building from that sight line.
And so between the tree save area and the edge of the pond, there is no existing vegetation to be saved?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Correct.
Any additional questions for staff? Thank you. All right, we do have opposition in this case, so we will go into a public hearing. We will start with the proponents, and we have Luke Dickey from Stemler Associates who will speak on behalf of the proponent. Again, each side has 12 minutes.
Good afternoon, Luke Dickey with Stemler Associates, 601 North Trade Street, Suite 200, Winston-Salem, North Carolina, 27101. Thank you for this opportunity to get in front of you this afternoon to discuss this project. Back in 2019, basically it came forward with lot number 4, and we had a building on that one that actually had a lot more parking on the side. So we're revising the plan to add more building, more dock as a spec building. The building that was brought in front of you in 2019 actually was kind of we had somebody that we thought was going to go in that space, so it was tailored to that. So now we've made some tweaks to that site plan. And so that part of that discussion, when that was rezoned and then brought in, also was in regards to the screening and buffering as well. Because as Chris had described, we have that condition where we basically got a valley and we're basically plateaued on one side. And so as you get down to the bottom of the valley, all the trees down at the bottom side, so any on Glen Way, really have a screen view up. You really can't see much. Actually, on our site, I went out and visited this morning, basically where the power line easement, we have that Duke Energy power line easement. We got the tree line that stops basically at that. If you stand at the bottom of that tree line and look out, you really can just see the tops of the houses. And then there might be a few corridors when you walk around trees that will actually see into this site. It's hard to really describe what's going on when this gets built because of the fact there is so much topo and you really can't get to yourself to a place to see what the condition is going to be like. So where that tree line is on the bottom side, and you can actually it ends basically right here at the power line easement. We're at an elevation of probably around 875. And so but we're going to actually be raising that up about 20 feet as we grade out this pad for the building. So I couldn't get a picture about what that end condition is going to be like. So right now you can't see anything, but I imagine once we raise this up, that we're going to have a little bit of view corridor. It's going to see this building a lot more than what it is out there on the site now. So as part of that, we recognize that condition. So what we had done with lot number 4 is we came in on the backside of the truck court, at the top of the slope, was to volunteer another buffer yard to be located in that location. So then basically all the planting then would be up in that top perimeter, so that it would screen anything as that grows up instead of being down at the bottom of the slope. And so what we're going to propose then is to do that same kind of condition for lot number 3, would be a 20-foot wide type 3 buffer yard, meeting the 40-foot planting ratio, which would be 3 deciduous trees and 12 primary evergreen trees every 100 linear feet. So that would run then basically the entire length of the backside of the building at the upper level. So we'll still have the trees saved, the buffer down at the very bottom at the Glenway, but then we'll add another buffer at the top that will grow up over time that will help screen then the building from there. Our pinch points that we have on this site is we've got the power line easement and then we have the property line. And so you can see we've got a 400-foot wide building and then our truck court at 150. And then we've got some space for grading on the end. So we don't have, that's unfortunately our pinch point. So if we were looking to save some of the existing trees on the south side of that power line, right now what it is, there's a bunch of scrub kind of pines that are on the outside perimeter of that. And there's a few pockets of some larger deciduous trees. But the majority of the deciduous trees are a little bit more interior to that woodland pocket. So we'd have to really move about 80 feet into the site to really save some substantial trees on there. Doing that then would basically take out 100 feet of our building. So then, our 500,000 square foot building where we're looking at having, we got a prospective tenant or somebody that's really interested in this site, then that would not make it viable for them. And then we have to catch up with grade. So we wouldn't be able to put a berm in this scenario. We actually got about 20 feet of retaining walls on one portion of this site too, as we're just trying to make up the grade change. So wouldn't really be able to add any berming into that area. But again, most of the neighbors are at a lower elevation already looking up. So when we put that planting in there, they're going to be looking up with that planting there. So it's not like a situation where we're right next. We're just trying to get that additional height with somebody being right next to you. And that was the condition that we had on lot number 4, where we had the residents, basically that building is much closer into it and about at the same elevation as the adjacent property owner. So adding a berming then added that additional height for additional screening. In this case, I'm not sure you really even noticed if we did put a berm in there that would add additional screening, because we've got 500 feet to 1,000 feet away from wherever the neighbors are across the way. So adding in a berm, I don't think would add too much more screening in that scenario.
What about the tree type, tree
So,
variety?
yeah, so for the type 3 buffer yard requirements, the 3 deciduous trees are large variety trees that you have to place in, and then the primary evergreen trees are the larger varieties. I believe that they have a minimum of a 10-foot at maturity requirement in the UDO, but obviously what we plant, we'd want to see something that gets higher than that, and then your large variety trees would meet those same UDO.
A lot of times those, just as an example, those primary evergreens are a lot of time like Nellie Stevens, holly, which get very large
those
and
get up to 30
get
feet.
very dense at the base. And again, I'm not saying that's what they're going to plant, but you see that a lot in those primary evergreens or those type of plants generally.
Is there, I couldn't quite tell from the plans, you're not in conflict with the right-of-way?
No, we're outside the Duke Power easement. Yeah, that's another, we have to keep our retaining walls a certain distance away from that. And then, of course, we can't grade within there because of the towers. So we don't want to raise any grade in those locations.
Okay.
Any other questions, comments? All right, thank you.
All right, appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Mr. Chairman, there's about 8 minutes left.
All right, is anyone else here would like to speak in favor? All right, if not, I'll move to the opposition. We have 2 signed up. The first speaker is Matt
It's okay, Mernan.
Mernan. All right. If you could come to the podium, state your name, address, and zip code for the record.
My name is Matt Mernan. I live at 4135 Whitwood Lane, 27107. I'm here today representing, I'm the board president of Glen Meadow HOA. I represent 120 people in the HOA. A lot of discussion has been put to me the last day to come and represent. Expected to have a lot more people show up, as they said they would, but work schedules being what they are, it's all working family, class families. In 2019, I remember I'm 2 streets away. A lot of this was cut down. A lot of people were upset that, they come to me and said, hey, we paid a premium. We had this, we had that. I said, yeah, I understand, and we'll see what happens. So things have quieted down, and there hasn't been a lot going on. It's been a big learning curve for me on what goes on and how things are. We are actually, as an HOA, responsible, and the city did it this way, I don't know why, but maintaining draining easement to that pond. So there's different things around there that do affect us. Now, if you look at the cul-de-sac, the picture on the cul-de-sac, where that cul-de-sac is, one of my other board members, I was at his house last night. He's at the top of the hill, like you guys were saying before, that does go down the hill. So the biggest thing that everybody's worried about is, one, was said to me, is noise and light pollution. Because I know there's certain times a year I walk out of my door and I live 2 streets away, and the way the clouds and this and that and everything else is, with just the 2 buildings that are there now, you would think you were next door at the Glen High School football stadium and the lights were all lit up. So that's one thing. And then people worried about coming to me, worried about noise with trucks coming and going, worried about all the hours of the night and whatnot. People were raising kids, so on and so on and so forth. So we pretty much know that this has been in the works for a long time, and the biggest thing, and I'm happy to hear the discussion being had, is the buffer. So that's the biggest thing. We're not in so much total opposition. We know something's going to go there. It's just we don't want to either walk out our back doors or walk out our front doors and see these giant buildings. So So that was the gist of everything. Because after they had clear cut everything in 2019, quite a bit of stuff has grown back up. So we were pretty happy to see that, and now everybody's upset and worried that they're just going to see everything clear cut, like that whole area clear cut, and that's what everybody's really worried about. The people down at the bottom of the hill think they're going to be affected more by just looking up and seeing these big buildings. So that was the gist of, and then the lack of, a lot of people were like, hey, they're 500 square feet from the building, and those are the only people that got notices. There was a lot of upset people about that. More people think they should have got notified. That's why I got the phone call. And then some guys this time of year, 5 days before, only getting notices, guys are like, man, if I'd been on vacation, I would have missed this thing totally. So just want to put some of those concerns out there. And it sounds like some people did send emails, did send concerns, so that you guys are discussing that. As far as the trees and whatnot, one of the things with everything that I deal with, I'm a mechanic by trade, but I do a lot of landscaping of my own place. The building's going to be, 45 foot tall or so? And we're talking about whatever trees we plant, maybe they're hopefully going to get as tall or taller than those over there, and with a mixture. So, and we all know different times of year, you could have big giant trees with nice leaves on them. Come wintertime, you're seeing right through. So I appreciate you guys giving me time and listening to me. And I think that's about it.
Thanks, Matt.
Appreciate it.
Any questions for Matt?
Yeah, Mr. Madan. So your two issues are the buffer and the lights. Is that right?
Yeah, everybody's been coming to me worried about the light that we already have over there. You
Right.
can notice.
Yeah.
More light's going to be more light, and then
Yeah.
the noise. And now we think with that buffer, you have a buffer with anything, it would cut down on the noise.
Yeah.
And like we've talked about, you guys are well aware from what I'm hearing, there's a slope. And we were afraid, that's going to be the top of the slope, and at the top of the slope, you're going to have giant buildings.
Now, is it my understanding correct, Mr. Murphy, that we've done the light ordinance since the last building occurred, so the spillage out of these lights should be much less than?
I believe that the buildings that are being referred to are the ones that were probably built in 2019, the Bunzel and the other building out there. Those have been subject to the lighting requirements.
Oh, yeah.
But the issue, again, you've got, with lighting, you've got a couple of different things. You've got, spill over at the property line, and you've got, the way the lights are oriented. So if you have them up, you're going to actually see, it's going to cast the light onto you. You're going to be looking into the bulb. And, if you have too many lights or too intense lights, you'll get that spillover at the property line. That's what our ordinance addresses. Our ordinance doesn't really address kind of like dark skies kind of thing. I mean, you're going to be able to walk out of your property and see that there are lights over there. So again, if there are issues with the lighting that's been installed, we'll be glad to look at that. But I believe that the buildings that have previously been constructed out there have been subject to those lighting requirements that the planning board and the elected bodies approved in the mid to late 2010s.
Yeah, and we've all known for, 2 decades almost that there's something was going to be built here, so trying to work those things out. And I personally like this light ordinance. I've seen it in operation, and it seems to make a big difference than the old forms of lights. So
Yeah, like I said,
I
it's
hope
just
that will make a difference for
certain
you.
times a year, I notice, I walk out like, whoa, where'd all that light come from? But then most of the time I don't notice it, but that's the big thing is now you're adding 2 more buildings with the light that's already there. That's where the concerns have come in.
Well, keep on it in terms of the spillage and stuff, because it should be within certain ranges.
At what point in time will the lighting plan have to be submitted for permitting?
At the time, but basically, let's say this gets approved today and they come in for permits within the next couple of months. Essentially, whenever they submit their plan package, and again, depending on how quickly they need to go, they may submit, a grading and foundation package, and then a shell package, and then a final package. But anyway, through that process, as part of the zoning review, the lighting will be reviewed along with the landscaping and, parking requirements, all those kind of things. So it will be reviewed by our staff, and then an engineer has to certify that the lights were installed per the approved plan. And that's kind of how that works out. So on the back end, we reviewed on the front end. On the back end, we get certification from the project lighting engineer, which a lot of times is Duke Energy, that says it was installed per the approved plans.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, we have 8 minutes left.
8 minutes left. We now have Mr. Keith Mahaffey.
Yes.
If you would state your name and address and zip code for the record, please.
My name is Keith Mahaffey. My address is 3320 Stacy Court, Winston-Salem, 27107.
Thank you.
And the reason I'm here today, I do not live in the affected area that we see on the screen right now, but I do live in the Union Cross community, which is right there at the Temple School Road, Millennium Drive area. And I appreciate the opportunity today to speak. I know that we are speaking about that particular issue right there, but I was contacted by neighbors that live at Gray Tut, which is right in this area here. They weren't able to come today, but they asked if I could come, so I'm kind of representing them a little bit. And their concern is just like the gentleman that spoke from the Glen Landing area, but their bigger concern, and the reason I'm here today is because we all out here in this area have been affected by a previous zoning and permitting situation that's occurring at the corner of Millennium Drive and Temple School Road. Thank you, sir.
That should probably get it, so.
Yep. If you look right down here, you see where Temple School Road curves. It's right there on the corner. It says GI-S. Initially, years ago, it was a property that was zoned for, if I'm correct, Chris, you can correct me if I'm wrong. It was zoned for Caterpillar to be able to store their axles. And the planning department at the time felt like it was an odd situation, I think, and the only thing they could classify it was manufacturing C, which doesn't really fit the whole area that is out there for that particular business park. And I also want to mention the business park overall for Walberg Road, the Union Cross Business Park. I'm familiar with both business parks. There's not a single business out there that does any outside manufacturing at either place except for this piece of property right here it went from a screening place, it went from a place for the axles to a screening place. And then the screening place was able to get it changed to a manufacturing C, I think, at that, where they sold it to a company called Piedmont Hoist and Crane. And in 2018 or so, there was a lot of construction going on because we know we live in an area that is perfect for industrial development because of its location. All as citizens, all we've really cared about is just the people that are in elected positions or boards or whatever, that there's a balance. That's all we ask for, is a balance between residential and industrial. Well, this company came in, they located part of their business from Guilford County. They do industrial hoist and crane, where they build them and stuff. We started noticing all this noise, and at first I thought, well, this is just part of the general construction of the buildings and stuff. And I rode over there and was asking some people what was going on over there. And the people that came out and met me were not truthful. And I could go on. I don't have but a few minutes here. I'm not going to go into the details. This is not the right forum for that. But anyways, we've got a company over there that is doing outside industrial sandblasting, large pieces. It sounds like, you know, the new jet company that's down at Piedmont Triad Airport that's just come in. It sounds like they're testing their jets over there. It is unbelievable. When I first heard this, I was getting off from, I've worked 2 jobs my whole life. I was getting off from my one job one morning. I thought I had a stick underneath my vehicle. And I live back here, I'm not even affected at Gray Tech like those people. They're like a few hundred feet away from what's going on. They've got the dusting from it coming over onto their property, had to keep their windows closed. But anyways, the reason I'm here about the property under consideration, it sounds like that that's just going to be a warehouse-type function for what we're talking about today, that's great. And it sounds like there's concern about the buffers and all that. That's great. The problem is, they were concerned that it could be changed, and we've got documentation where this other property, where I'm talking about Piedmont Hoist and Crane, they came in, it was said it was going to be one thing, but they never were truthful about what their intent was. Now we wake up, it's 2022. People don't go to work at 7 o'clock in the morning and come home at 5. We've got people in our neighborhood. We've got lawyers, we've got accountants, we've got people who work for the school systems, we've got policemen, we got firemen, we've got a whole gamut of people live over here. And all we've wanted is, why has the process allowed a company to come in and do outside sandblasting in a mainly residential area? And I know there was concerns on this planning board years ago about that, because we pulled up some of the documents and there was questions that, hey, this is not appropriate out here. But unfortunately, that's what we got now. We're still trying to work. I will say this, Chris, I've talked with Chris, and we've talked with Dudley Watts, and we've talked with James Taylor, and they've all been good. They've been very helpful as much as they can. Sometimes it's not in their wheelhouse. They can't specifically say or do too much because of stuff that was done prior, and I understand that. But we're still working, trying to see if we can find a solution. And the people that I'm representing today about this property, they just want to make sure. And she called me, one of the ladies, and said that she had talked with, I think,
Mark.
Yeah.
Probably Mark.
Yeah. And he had assured her that it was just going to be a warehousing situation. And so we said we were going to still come just to educate ourselves about this process. The problem with planning boards and planning function and all of that, just like the gentleman stated earlier, 99% of the people out here are working all the time. They got families. We're not versed in all the stuff that goes on with planning and the functions, and you got to do this. But what I can say, that on this property here, I'm talking about Piedmont Hoist and Crane, where the concern is about the noise. We had people at every stage of the process participate and show up at the public forums, tried to contact the owners, and we did everything from our side that we could do. That's all you can do. And then we still have got what we've got going on right now. And the company, they also said initially they were just going to move part of their operations out there. Well, I've got newspaper clippings where they moved 100% from their property that was in Guilford County to this location. And I've got in other journals and things in the business community where they're wanting to expand rapidly. And so I think there is some talk now, maybe trying to give them some incentive money or something to do their work inside, which would be great. Just like Caterpillar does. They do general industrial and they do it inside, because it would be totally inappropriate for them to be outside doing any kind of manufacturing. So that's the reason I'm here. I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, there is 23 seconds left.
All right, we have 23 seconds left. I see one more person.
He's out, it just,
And your time's not running right now, so you're.
Okay. I got 23 seconds. I'm Stephanie Whaley. I live at 6133 Glenway Drive. I just wanted to pass out this exhibit to you. Some of you were asking questions about the elevation and how it would look from the street and where we are located. And so I prepared this exhibit and I worked really hard on it, so I wanted to pass it out to you, if you wouldn't mind to look at it.
Is that what you also emailed?
So I emailed a similar one that was
Okay.
less clear than this one.
Gotcha.
Like you said, we're full-time working people, so I finished this one up today. But if you guys could just take a look at that, we're strongly hoping that we can maintain a strip of trees along the side. I know he proposed making another buffer with different kinds of trees, but the current trees are of adequate height to, shield the view from that building, and so we would really prefer that. In the absence of that, if the trees, if we're going to go the other route with the trees, we would just ask that be kind of outlined with more detail and actually be in the final development plan before we approve this. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your service.
Mr. Chairman, we are out of time. I did want to hit on something that Mr. Mahaffey said, and again, he's been. We've talked a lot over the last 3 or 4 years. The only thing I will say that is a little different than what was stated is whenever Piedmont Hoist and Crane came in, they didn't come in and rezone the property to add the use manufacturing C. The original, and I can't think of the hauling company it was, but it was a hauling company that was done in conjunction with Caterpillar whenever it was rezoned in the late 2000s. Someone came in and rezoned this piece of property for a number of uses. And one of the uses was manufacturing B, along with manufacturing A and manufacturing B, manufacturing C, warehousing, had a lot of uses. Of course, what they were contemplating at that time was essentially a gravel lot with a little, what they had shown on that plan was a gravel lot with a little, probably no more than 20 by 20 building that kind of like housed their offices. And again, this was where the axles were trucked all over the country and to the ports like at Charleston, wherever else to get shipped overseas and to go elsewhere across the country. Whenever Caterpillar in the mid-2010s kind of repositioned what they were doing there because of, I believe there was probably not a large need for earth-moving axles as it had originally been envisioned. So I believe that they kind of changed stream and started doing some other things there. That property became vacant. And then what happened was whenever Piedmont Hoist and Crane decided to purchase it, and we actually have the person who worked on the site plan at the time here. Anyway, essentially, they had to do what's called a site plan amendment, where they had to revise their site plan. They showed the buildings that they wanted to do, and it was even a little more complicated than that because you had a county portion, you had a city portion. There was a whole lot of things, and there were some specific conditions related to the city portion that had to get rezoned at that time that specifically said you could have no outdoor activities. But the portion that was in the county, again, was a site plan amendment. And the site plan amendment, again, just basically changed their site plan. It did not add a use. It didn't do anything different to the plan. And whenever they came in to get permitted, they indicated they were going to be manufacturing B. But whenever I believe they started doing work outside, we said, hey, you can't do that outside. But again, they weren't doing any, they didn't have to add any area to their site. They were essentially doing sandblasting outside. So they resubmitted their plan under manufacturing C and got it approved as such. So again, I'm just trying to give a little bit of flavor of the history behind that. But for the most part, Mr. Mahaffey was spot on as far as everything that's happened. That is what has happened on the site. They continue to do sandblasting there. It is somewhat different than the other manufacturing areas in the area. But again, to kind of come full circle, I want to put us kind of back on task of what we're here to decide today, which is a final development plan for LIS, the site plan that's before you, and the only uses that are permitted on those sites are manufacturing A and manufacturing B, both of which have to be done exclusively inside, and then warehousing. Those are the three uses that are proposed for these two buildings. So there are some assurances there that there will not be outdoor activities at these locations.
Thank you for that. Are there any additional questions or thoughts?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
I just want to make a couple of comments. And I believe it was the last person who passed out this. You sent us an email earlier.
I did. It didn't have that exact exhibit in it.
Right. I just wanted to point out that you had put in your email, you had quoted part of the area plan, which makes a point that there should be a balance in the sense of providing screening from the residential areas. I remember when the area plan was developed, the attempt was to provide some sensitivity to the fact that this is a residential area that will be incorporating industrial. And the vision, I believe, for the industrial was more like an industrial park type situation where you had some screening and it was more compatible with the residential development. And I just think, given what Mr. Mahaffey just told us, it seems to me that we may not be adhering quite as strictly to what the area plan is talking about in terms of that balance, especially putting in, allowing GIS, which I think may not have been such a good decision. LI is fine, but maybe GI is too intense for this area, especially if it allows manufacturing C. So I just think going forward, it would be good for us to keep that in mind, that we do need a balance, and we do need to think about screening, and we do need to think about the residents as well. So that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you.
The only thing I would like to add is I've had the opportunity over the years to work with the people and the company that are proposing these buildings, and I will attest to the fact that they are first quality and go out of their way to keep their word. I think everybody in this room will be able to trust them going forward.
I'd be happy to speak to that point. I know we're out of time, so I'm happy to do that after those.
Any other questions or comments? All right. Seeing no one, I declare the public hearing closed. What is the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the planning board recommend approval of W 2744.
A motion by Mr. Lamb,
Second.
second by Ms. McRae. Any comments?
If I could, we need to make sure, and we don't have we don't have anything drafted in front of you, but I'm going to give an attempt. I believe it's the intent of the petitioner, and we can get them up here to confirm this. And I believe it's been the thought of the planning board that would be in conjunction with a modified site plan. And what I was going to say is, essentially, we need to approve, if it's the board, if it's the planning board's will, we need to approve that with an added condition that essentially says that they will install a 20-foot type 3 buffer width with a 40-foot type 3 buffer planting on the top of the slope on the north side of lot number 3.
Yeah.
Okay, I amend my motion to include that condition.
Previous motion,
Accept that as a second.
all right, is
repeat it.
Come on, you.
seconded. Any questions, discussion? All those in favor, sign of aye. Aye. Opposed, the same sign. That is unanimous.
And I'm sorry. Walter, when did you get here, just for this case?
I did
Okay.
right before this case.
Okay,
Sorry
gotcha.
about that.
I've got the wrong vote down. I just happened to look up and remember that you were here. Mr. Chairman and Board, that brings us to the end of the agenda. And that brings us to the staff report. For the first item on the staff report, I'm going to turn to Kirk Erickson, who will give you a preview of your work session coming up 2 weeks from today.
Good afternoon, board members. We actually have a fairly full work session for the August 25th meeting. The first item on the agenda is going to be continuing the discussions that you all had at last work session regarding UDO-CC 17. That's the text amendment in relation to the Winston Weaver fire, adding chemical and battery manufacturing. As we mentioned at the last meeting, board members have been asked to submit comments. We have received some of those questions, and we're putting together responses. We're also kind of digging deeper in terms of regulatory authorities that would be looking at these uses at the state and federal and local level, and we've got a matrix that we're going to be presenting of that, so it should be a good discussion aid. The second item is on your agenda for the September public hearing. It's UDO-CC 18. It's a text amendment, cleanup in nature, that's basically revising the UDO for the submission requirements for various items to reflect that we use an all-digital submission portal now via IDT plans. We still have references in the ordinance for various copies of paper plans being submitted, so we need to clean that up. And the last item, which I know you all are eagerly awaiting, is a discussion on the comp plan, the Forward 2045 plan, in anticipation of starting our kind of soft launch of public input gathering in the fall and going to in-person public input in quarter one of '23. So That's all I have, and I'll turn it back over to Chris.
Thank you, Kirk. The next item on the staff report will be, we'll hear from David Reed for a preview of your September zoning hearing caseload.
Okay, it looks like we have 9 public hearing items. 2 of them are text amendments, and then 7 cases all have site plans with them. And then we also have 2 subdivisions and 2 planning board reviews. So we got onto the back page of our, haven't done that for a while, so that'll all be for September 8th.
Will there be an intermission?
Possibly.
We'll make sure we have one.
If needed, correct? Mr. Chairman and Board, the next item I have, I just want to give you, I know we do include updates on zoning cases that you've previously considered, but I do want to give you 3 specific updates. The Somerset case that the planning board heard back in May, that was continued to City Council to August, was continued again to September. It's my understanding that the petitioner wants to look at perhaps making the single-family lots wider, which would result in losing some of those lots, but then maybe pick up some townhomes, exact same configuration, but just a little bit of repackaging to kind of address some of the concerns that the neighbors had in the fact that these lots that, as proposed, were so narrow, it dictated front-loaded garages, that the homes wouldn't be necessarily in character with kind of the homes that are both in the newer neighborhoods out there, as well as the neighborhoods that were built in the 50s and 60s. So they continued that. We haven't seen anything to date. I'm not sure if it will be heard in September or whether they'll request another continuance to continue to work on that, but they are, it's my understanding, the process of doing that. We've had some discussions up front with the site plan preparer and the petitioner who've asked some questions. The leader of the opposition, Mr. Samuel Villegas, has also reached out to the city clerk and inquire, they're ready to come to the table and listen. So again, I'm not sure when those discussions are going to happen, but hopefully they will. And again, hopefully that will be to keep that on track for September. If not, it may get pushed to October, and I'll continue to update the board. The other zoning case that was heard on that same agenda was the Riverwalk case that's going before the county commissioners. That was that case was continued by the county commissioners, and they asked the petitioner to look at some treatment along the shared border with the county with Tanglewood, and they did come back with some things that the commissioners had asked for. That public hearing was held a week ago today, and they actually continued it to make a decision on August 25th. So that's when that one will be heard. And then finally, on case updates, for those that did not see the city council meeting last Tuesday night, and it was on Tuesday because of the gala for the Black Theater Festival, I believe that the planning board message was heard loud and clear on the Wells Fargo case with a unanimous recommendation for denial, because after that item was recommended for denial, the Wells Fargo and their engineers came and met with utility staff and planning staff, and we did come up with a solution that has a fence design more in keeping with the original intent and design behind that project. And as a result of that, the city council did approve the request for amendment unanimously with that revision. So those are kind of the 3 case updates I had. The last thing that I have is just to let everyone know that the city council at that same meeting did unanimously recommend approval for Salvador Patino, who's a local architect, who's the owner of Chavo Design, to be a new planning board member in place of Melinda, who has actually served 8.5 years at this point. And he was approved that night. The way the city-county planning board appointment process works is the county commissioners have to do their concurrence with that, and that is scheduled for their meeting also on the 25th. I believe that Melinda will, and I don't know if she's going to be here. She will officially still be a member on the 25th for the work session, but that would be her last meeting. And then I believe Mr. Patino will be sworn in and will be here for your September 8th zoning meeting. And with that, I also would like to, again, we will recognize Melinda at a later meeting, but again, 8.5 years on the planning board, lots of engagement prior to that. She was the chair of the North Suburban Area Plan Steering Committee back when we had such, and she has really put in a lot of time and effort into planning in our community over the decades, not just the years. So
with as much time as she's put in, we're going to put in the same amount of time to plan her exit. So start thinking about how we can properly celebrate all she's done for the planning board.
Mr. Chairman, with that, that is all I had for staff report.
All right.
One question.
Yes.
The Piedmont Hoist property, that is the GIS on the map that's up right now, right?
It is. It's GIS, and there's a sliver of property in between that property and the properties along Graytuck that's also GIS, but that's city GIS, and that's where they can't do any outdoor work. They can store their cranes to be worked on there, but they can't be worked on there, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
So, but yes, it is that GIS portion there on the curve of Temple School
The
Road.
addition of the manufacturing C classification, did that come as a planning board review or is that a staff?
No, the addition of the manufacturing C was approved whenever the axles, whenever the county commissioners originally rezoned the property back in 2005, 6, 7, 8, 9. I'm not sure when it was. I'm not sure when Caterpillar was constructed, but it was the late 2000s. And whenever they saw the need for this trucking company, that got rezoned as well. But the manufacturing C was put in place at that point. But again, it was a gravel pad with like a 20 by 20 building. Whenever Piedmont Hoist and Crane decided to buy and move their operations there, they had to go through a site plan amendment because they needed larger buildings and those kind of things. But the use, manufacturing C, had been there since the original approval for the axle carrier back in the late 2000s.
And the outdoor sandblasting has always been a permitted use in the manufacturing C classification?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. And again, in Mr. Mahaffey's defense, if you don't understand, zoning, again, whenever we rezone something, we issue what's called a special use district permit.
Right.
Well, then you also have a special use permit that, has a quasi judicial hearing with it. And again, whenever you rezone something for special use district zoning, it becomes its own standalone zoning district, and you're saying what uses go in there and what the plan looks like. Yeah. So, again, zoning is so nuanced and it's so complicated. And like I said, he's done a great job of understanding it. But, again, if you're the layman and sandblasting is keeping you from going to sleep after you've come home from your second job, third shift job, whatever, then, zoning's important, but you want to go to sleep. So, again, he's done a great job of trying to understand it all, but it's just so nuanced and technical. Again, they aren't doing anything that's not allowed. His thing is it should have never been allowed.
Yeah,
right.
And of course, that bell was rung years ago.
Yeah, and then lastly, Jack's comments about the quality of this tenant that's going into this manufacturing facility, that's great, but as we all know, ownership is not forever. That's right.
Things change.
And then we should have an increased appreciation for the focus that Melinda has historically placed on permitted uses in all of our cases. So anyway.
And just for clarification's sake, my remarks have nothing to do with a tenant for that building. It was about the development company itself.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I didn't mean to.
Yeah. I don't know.
All right.
Yeah. Yep, zoning's forever.
Until it's changed.
Until it's changed, that's right.
All right, is there anything else for the good of the order?
I was just going to say sorry for my tardiness, something unexpected. This was the fastest meeting I've had in my whole year. I was expecting us to be on the first item by the time I made it, but yeah, so just wanted to share. Sorry about that.
I'll just also say I greatly value someone with 20, 25 years' time here that has a memory that again and again keeps us out of the ditch.
Yeah.
Well, don't trust that memory so much. I also have a computer that I sit behind all day and I can look stuff up, so.
I've also learned let's not give credit. That means you're about to retire, so we're not going to give credit. We appreciate it.
Again, I have a kid who's just starting high school. I'm not retiring anytime soon.
All right, Is there anything else for the good of the order?
We'll have a motion to adjourn while we're still.
There's a second. All right. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.